My college draft is proud to announce my conference called Educate You. Educate You core areas will cover recruitment, retention, and how to build a strong alumni base of underrepresented and first-generation college students. Welcome to another episode of Educate You podcast, brought to you by My College Draft, where education is the new money. I'm Lamont, and I will serve as your facilitator for the topic today, which is called Black Wall Street. I have a dynamic panel, and we have an outstanding guest today. So go ahead, fellas, introduce yourselves.
I am David Hartman.
I wish I could mute this.
Ricky Frierson.
And at Covington.
Yes, our special guest. We call him Q. But Mr. Covington, man, I want you to kind of enlighten the people who you are before we kind of dive into our topic today, sir.
Thanks so much, boss man. I really appreciate it. So like I said, I am Q at Covington. I'm currently serving as the executive director of the Tulsa Initiative.
That's awesome. And tell a little bit about the initiative, sir, because it makes a big difference and impact on our subject matter today.
Definitely, man. Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me on. So Tulsa Initiative is a initiative that a couple of guys and I, a couple of years ago, really saw the need for mentorship within our community. Growing up, going to college, I was actually blessed to have many mentors. Ended up joining the oldest, the boldest, coldest fraternity in all the land, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And I was able to serve as a college brother on our national board as assistant regional vice president. And one of the things that I noticed from traveling to state, man, was that a lot of college brothers did not actually have a mentor. And so this was really interesting to me because a lot of times when we get in conversations about economics, about growth, personal development, as well as professional development, most of the time, if you have a mentor, that's someone that can really lead you into that direction. So we noticed that it was a gap there, man. So we said, hey, what can we do within our community to make impact? And the Tulsa Initiative was birthed, a digital platform for Black and brown males 18 to 24. So right now we're running a 8-week program with Black males that would come through the program. Each week there's a different topic as it relates to Black wealth. What does that mean? But also focused on entrepreneurship. And so they'll go through the curriculum, man. Like I said, each week is a different topic. We also bring in key industry speakers to talk about whatever the topic is for that week. On that 8th week, they go before a panel of investors and pitch their business plan, and they business get funded, jump started. And I really shouldn't even use the word investor because that's really not even the proper terminology. But a group of brothers, they go before this panel, man, and they essentially compete to get their business jump started with those funds. Investors saying like, hey, we're giving you something, we want something back in return. We don't want anything back in return. Only thing we want for that Black male to do is go back in their community and create change.
That's awesome.
So that's the Tulsa Initiative.
Did I hear this? Wait a minute. Did I hear you say you gonna give me some stuff with nothing asked in return and I can be successful?
Awesome.
Man, we don't want nothing back, man.
Bro, that's awesome.
What's the cap on this? What's the age cap?
18 to 24.
Man, look, you about to make me go back in time. Benjamin Button yourself. Benjamin Button all y'all and go back and get a 24-year-old ID.
So once again, you're listening to the Educate You podcast. For those who are tuning in right at this moment, I have my outstanding panel. We have a magnificent guest, Mr. Covington. We can't wait to find out more about your organization a little bit later because again, it's tied into this subject matter called Black Wall Street. And Dr. Frierson, if you don't mind, can you give like a historical perspective of Black Wall Street?
Sure. What's up, everybody? Again, it's me coming in live in another spot. But yeah, so obviously we know that we're coming off the accumulation and the celebration of Juneteenth. We're supposed to celebrate the freedom of the slaves in 1856 in Galveston, Texas. 1865 in Galveston, Texas. And then in 1917, we had a beginning of what was a lot of different things as far as Black successful communities who were in well thriving areas, but were in racially segregated areas thriving. One of the most notable communities that was burned down by white envious individuals, I should say, was Tulsa. And essentially, what it was a buildup of where people who were migrating out of the South post Civil War era, who were finding a homeland and also a new beginning in the Tulsa, Oklahoma area. A lot of people don't know, but Oklahoma, when its original declaration was originally designed by Congress to be a state for all Blacks. It's supposed to be the free state for all Blacks. But as the land was coming there and oil was becoming prominent, then they quickly turned that around, and whites began coming in as well. But Tulsa was a spot. There was a little small spot in Tulsa that was still thriving for Black families and individuals. And what was going on is Green, Archer, and Pine, GAP. That's where you get the Gap Band from, because they were from Tulsa as well. But Green, Archer, and Pine was the little district area in which success was going on. And it all started because of supposedly a young man was in the elevator with a white female. Something happened. The white female didn't say really much of what happened, but just that this guy whistled at her. Of course, the white mobs come to the Black side of Tulsa. They're in a melee pursues. There's some shooting. Somebody gets shot. Then everybody starts rallying at the boys and on both sides, because at that time, a lot of people don't realize, but because Tulsa was such a thriving area, they had their own little police, and they had their own little security and stuff to make sure that nothing was coming to them. So when these white gentlemen were coming with this mob I shouldn't call them gentlemen. When these white mob was coming across to try to pursue this young male who I believe was 17, the police force, the Black force was like, we're not having none of that. Kind of shot off a few warning shots. And you can't do that. You can't bring a group of minorities together in collective action and unity against a certain demographic at that point in time. And so that kind of scared them. They brought the KKK and the mobs and everything else. And then what we ended up happening was we had the Tulsa massacre, in which businesses in that very dominant area was burnt down and never really got to start back up again to the same type of prominence that it was back in that time era. This is, again, one of the few, this is a small snapshot of one area in which this happened. I mean, this also started, I was doing my research before this call today. This also happened in East St. Louis, Illinois, Elaine, Arkansas, Rosewood, Florida, DC, New York. So this is happening beforehand. And if you all remember who tuned in last week, we talked about that we have to get rid of the mindset that minorities can't come together and have a successful community or successful business. We've been able to do that, but anytime that has happened, there has been a threat for some reason by the other side of the success of Black communities. And then there's some kind of way that in which they can come in and destroy it and take it over, because the mindset is we're taking their jobs away, we're taking their money away, we're too successful, we shouldn't have those kind of freedoms and liberties, et cetera, et cetera. And then a lot of times the tragic thing is, in a lot of these incidences in which these cities are burned down or these wealthy communities are burned down, very rarely, if any, do the white perpetrators get pursued, have justice executed on them, jail sentence, executions, or whatever. But almost 100% of the time, minorities who were defending themselves, their community, their families, end up being executed, hung, having electrocution on their genitals, all these kind of really crazy things. So this is what happened. We're highlighting Tulsa because, again, we just came out of Juneteenth, but then we also came out of the Tulsa not the celebration, but the memory of the Tulsa riots that happened this past weekend. And I'm sure everybody's seen on the news what was going on as well this past weekend with some guy in the office having a speech in that area as well. So that's just a quick 2-minute snapshot of what was going on in Tulsa.
Again, you're listening to the Educate You podcast, brought to you by My College Draft, where education is the new money. So either David or future Dr. Covington, I want you guys to take what Ricky said and give me areas where you feel like, in parts of the country where you feel like a Black Wall Street in today's stand can exist, right? So we have the makings to do it again. And was Black Wall Street, the massacre, one of the reasons why the black dollar does not turn in our community anymore? Does that make sense? So, Dr. Covington.
Cool, man. Well, so first off, Doc, you did an excellent job of giving us a recap. Really appreciate that. I think when we look at Tulsa, Oklahoma, right, and we really just look at, from the conception to Black Wall Street being burnt down, I think there were many factors that were playing here. We know that the community, Tulsa, white community, neglected the black section side of the town that they refer to as Little Africa, right? And so we also know that the Jim Crow laws in Tulsa, Oklahoma, as related to like the regulations and what was going on in the state. In a sense, I mean, some black people could not even shop, do business in those white communities. And so on one hand, it's like the money was circulating in our community because we had nowhere else to circulate our money. You follow what I'm saying? So we were doing business with each other. That's what we had to do. That was the law. That's what it was that we were doing. And so because of the racial segregation laws, it really prevented us from shopping with everybody else. I think the other side of that too, though, is when we look at, just how many businesses, there were over 300 black businesses, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, from private airlines, hotels, restaurants, hospitals, schools, right? And some of the most great physicians that we even read about today still were down there in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so when we wrestle with the ideal of, can we still have a Black Wall Street? Can we reenact this now in today's society? Of course, I would say yes. Reason why I would say yes is because I believe that, number one, we have the resources within our community to be able to create a community within our community where we're constantly doing business with each other. And I think slowly but surely we're getting back to that, where we're seeing, hey, buy black business, shop black business. We're seeing that. While I may be probably have a different standpoint on this than a lot of other people, I think that the truth of the matter is, in a sense, segregation was good, because segregation, we understood that we had to shop with each other, right? When you take segregation out of it and now we can shop wherever, do whatever, I feel like, there's a sense of community and culture that got lost in the translation of things. So for me, yes, absolutely positive. I believe that we can build Black Wall Street. I believe that we can have things in our community, man, where black people are doing business with black people. I think it's slowly happening as time go on, and as we continue to see things, and as America continues to show her red ugly head, I think it's even pushing us more to community.
I like that. David, from a visionary perspective, man, do you feel like it can be another Black Wall Street bigger than it ever was in the past?
I would say yes, because if we just look at where we are now as a culture and as a Black community, and how many people you have that built these huge businesses and continue to help and pull up one another, of course, I feel like it's something that's possible. The only thing for me is, I think there's always that constant fear of, are we going to end up with stuff being burned down again or taken away or whatever the case may be. And like I mentioned before, we got to value each other. And when I say that, being able to spend money with each other. For some reason, other stuff that is not made from us, or by us, we value a lot more than doing business with each other. So.
Again, you listen to the Educate You podcast. So, Dr. Frierson, so the education of the Black Wall Street and other communities that you mentioned before, how do we take that information and propel like our new talented 10th to maybe go on and exceed the numbers of Black Wall Street? Because the numbers when they show the numbers, it was like astronomical what the present value would be. It was in the millions and then like the damage they were talking about was in the billions. So how can we take that information and educate our youth, right, and make stronger politicians, stronger business people, businessmen, businesswomen, professors, etc.?
Well, we have to first understand our history to know where we're going in the future. And I think what Q said was right on spot, which is the segregation part of it. And a lot of people don't recognize or realize that the case of Plessy versus Ferguson, which established a separate but equal clause, the fight for initial freedoms wasn't about necessarily the segregation part. It was the equal part. Like, if we're going to be segregated, give us equal resources as you do to our white counterparts, and then we're cool. But it never happened, and that's why we have the Morrill Acts of 1890 with the HBCUs coming into play. That's why we had the Civil Rights era, because nothing was ever equal. It was just separate and unequal instead of what was supposed to follow the mandate of the law. And so I think if we were to really utilize the Tulsa Black Wall Street in Tulsa as an example, we can really position that as the epitome of, number one, this is what happens when there's truly separate and equal resources coming together, where there's equal amount of funding coming into the Black neighborhood as there is the white neighborhood, where equal amount of infrastructure and building and proprietary and banking and ability to have those resources generated to uplift the citizens within the community. That really show what happened. Same thing with Rosewood and other places. And what happens is when those things happen to when we start seeing things on equal playing field and the cream starts to rise to the top or becomes competitive, then this is when we see the destruction based off of envy and jealousy, right? And so I think that could be the lesson in how we shape the narrative on why Tulsa and the Black Wall Street was so important. Is because this is back in 1921. I mean, at the height of the KKK, at the height of racial tensions, where it was legal. Slavery still legal. I mean, it wasn't legal in slavery, but I mean, Jim Crow and all that stuff was legal. You know what I'm saying? It was legal to just do what you want to. You can just knock off somebody of color and just walk down the street and nothing was really going to happen to you. And they still found a way to be successful in their community. And then these other communities I mentioned as well. And so I think the first thing is the tragedy with the Tulsa Wall Street is this. Number one, a lot of Black communities lost the vision of the end point. So we all have this aspiration to become a business owner or entrepreneur or developer, but we lost what that finish line looks like. So now you have people just walking willy-nilly in the woods with no visual endpoint. It's like doing a 100-yard dash and not seeing the end line, right? You don't know which way to run. You're just running thinking that you're going somewhere. So I think that's number one. We lost the vision. Number two, going off of kind of what Q started at the beginning of this, we lost mentors to tell the story of success, right? We tell the stories of oppression. We tell the stories but we don't tell too many stories from family to family, from generation to generation of success within the family or within the community. We look externally, right? So we talk about the Malcolm X and the W. Du Bois, but who's that in my neighborhood? Who was the successful figure who started from a neighborhood that I'm familiar with, and I can see their trajectory and their pathways all the way to success. We're missing that. So number one, vision. Number two, mentorship. Number three, we're missing paying attention to the societal and community policies that affect success, right? And so last week we talked about how it's harder to get bank loans, and it's harder to find a mentor to take you up to these type of levels of et cetera, et cetera. And I was listening to a podcast from E.T. Thomas, and they was talking about this very thing about sometimes it's not that people don't want it, but they need someone to give them that vision. They need that mentor to tell them the steps, but they also need to understand the process. It doesn't happen overnight. You know, I can tell you right now, I've started 5 businesses. You know how many of them are successful now? 0. I failed at all 5 of them. We don't talk about that. But but then we always share the notion of we learn more from our failures than we do our successes too, right? But if I can tell people, hey, you trying to start this business, you might have to be patient on this, or you have to look at this, or you have to do this. And then I can tell them why I am successful, because there are other businesses that I'm successful at, right? Then I can share those stories of success, and then someone can see me and say, wait a minute, you're Dr. Frierson, and Lamont and David, y'all know me well. I'm crazy. I just do crazy stuff just like everybody else. I'm just a regular guy, and I just do my stuff. But when they found out that I'm credentialed, that I know how to do finances, that I've been around the world, that, you know, then it's all of a sudden like, oh, there's multiple layers to this cat. And we don't share our failures. We don't share our successes. And I said this, and I keep saying this all the time. We need more trailblazers than we do leaders. Leaders just direct stuff. Trailblazers make the path for people to follow down the line. Leaders just say, follow me down this path. In the Black community, we need trailblazers to make the path, and then have leaders come by to direct other people down the path. And so that's what needs to happen with the Tulsa and the Black Wall Street was a trailblazing community that said, we're going to make a path of success and let people know. And even history cannot eradicate nor disturb the narrative that they were as far as the epitome of Black success in America. That even though that the city was burned down and it never kind of reached that same height, we still know that they were extremely successful because they were trailblazers. And that's something that could be told, because that's a success in and of itself, that although they were burned down, we still talk about them to this day.
I like that. So, hey, Q, take his number 2 item and talk about the proper way to mentor, because there's a lot of people that mentor, but tell me the proper way to mentor so that the information can effectively be passed to the people who need it.
Man, super great question. So this is the approach when it comes to mentor that I have took and have adopted over the years. I think a lot of times we get mentor and life coach really mixed up, because sometimes when you find someone, you know, what they're really looking for is a life coach, not necessarily a mentor. How I always explain mentorship is you want a certain area that you want guidance in, right? And so for us, we focused on the entrepreneurship role, really helping our mentees really understand what does it mean to be an entrepreneur, right? But also walking them through the different types of entrepreneurs, and really understanding, you know, what being an entrepreneur is not just about the flashy, glamorous side. You follow what I'm saying? Back to Doc's point, but really even the ugly side, because all of us that are in our organization are also small business owners. And so you're really just walking through that level of mentorship with actually just walking the guys through from a practical side, but also from a knowledge-based side. So you understand, you actually understand the education component behind it. You understand the different types of business, corporations, etc., right? But then you also get that tangible side where we can also give you, hey, this is practicality. This is what we have experienced. This is what it looks like. This is the thing that don't nobody want to talk about. So I think mentorship, man, is really a thing where at least our organization, the approach that we have took on it is actually focusing in on one area and helping individuals grow within that area.
I like it. Again, you listen to the Educate You podcast being brought to you by My College Draft, where education is the new money. For those who are tuning in for the first time, panel, can you reintroduce yourselves, please?
I am David Hartman.
Ricky Frierson.
Q. Derek Covington.
They make me laugh every time they do this, man. So Mr. Covington, can you again talk a little bit more about your organization and some of the initiatives that you have? Because this Black Wall Street, to me, at one point was an area of a community, but it's becoming a philosophy where it becomes bigger than it's ever been, right? And so I want you to talk about those initiatives so we can start talking about. Because I love talking about progressive ideas, and you have some really progressive ideas underneath your umbrella. So let's talk about those ideas, sir.
Definitely, man. So, looking at Black Wall Street, right? We understand 1921 that Black Wall Street was valued at about $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
Today's society, roughly 2020, is looking at about $32 million. That was happening in our community with us, with Black people. So with the Tulsa initiative, one of the things we noticed, of course, was mentorship. But outside of the mentorship, we noticed that, hey, we have a lot of Black and brown males who have great ideas, right? Who have great ideas. However, they do not have someone behind them to push them, to educate them, to mentor, but also to invest in them. I grew up in a single parent household, father, long-time drug dealer, still a drug dealer to this day. And my mother was the one that raised me and my siblings. And growing up, we had big ideas, but no one around us was actually putting these ideas into practice for numerous reasons. One being that, hey, there was no mentorship, but then also there was no one in our family that was well enough successfully financially to be able to invest in the vision. And so one of the things that the Tulsa initiative is doing, man, we are, connecting with Black and brown males all over the United States, even in Canada, 18 to 24, man, and giving them the opportunity to learn about entrepreneurship, but not only learn about entrepreneurship, to get some mentoring from actual guys that's currently in the industry, man, who have successful businesses, but then also getting them to the point where, hey, they can prepare their business plan and their pitch before a group of funders, man, to jumpstart their initiative.
So if you guys can help me a little bit, because it's, I feel like everybody can be helped, but not by everybody, right? And so how do you reach those brilliant young people who are kind of like, kind of gone astray a little bit? And the reason why I'm saying that, because especially at my college draft, man, we deal with retention. We deal with a lot of different aspects of academics. How do you reach those who society says are unreachable, right? How do we connect with them? Because Black Wall Street, again, to me, is a philosophy that they could take the baton and really run with it. But again, certain environmental conditions have, maybe obstruct their vision, like Ricky had said earlier. How do we reach them?
No, I think that's great. I think the truth of the matter is, I don't think everybody is to reach everybody.
Right.
I believe that everybody is assigned to a certain demographic or group of people that it is that they will be able to reach. However, I think that everybody, especially as Black males, have an obligation to reach somebody. And so one of the approaches that I'm always taking is, hey, everybody do what you feel that you're called to do. And if we're empowering other people to do what they feel that they're called to do, then guess what? We will be able to reach the masses. I look at typically the type of young guys that are drawn to me. I grew up in Parvis. Dad wasn't there, was a drug dealer. By the age of 14, I was charged with non-felony charges. So a lot of times the guys that I reach are guys that, are in similar situations, or, that I was in. And then there's a group that, like, typically if they come from like a 2-parent household, you know what I'm saying? And, it's like sometimes there's a disconnection, right? And I understand, like, hey, I'm called to reach a certain group of people, right? And so with that being called, I just try to do my best, man, to empower those group of people, man, and also give them the skills to go back and do the same thing in their community.
I like it. So each one of us are from urban environments. So those type of environments that everybody say produces at-risk youth. What drives you guys to excel? Because there's somebody that's listening to this, or some parent that may be listening to this who has a son that they feel like is like, oh my gosh, I don't know what we're gonna do next kind of thing. What drives you guys? What inspires you? What inspires you to wake up every morning, Dr. Frierson, Dr. Compton, Mr. Hardman, that, the days when you don't feel like getting up, but you still want to pursue your PhD or still pursue entrepreneur endeavors? Like, what drives you guys?
For me, number one is my family. Like I wake up with the mindset that my kids should be able to come to me as a father and get information about anything in life. So I never wanted to have the excuse of if my daughter or my son who wanted to pursue their PhD and they come and say, "What's that like?" and I didn't know. Right? I didn't want them to come to me and say they wanted to do some kind of training for something or pursue some kind of talent and what kind of discipline is needed, and I didn't know. So I always wanted to be, for my kids' sake, that kind of like the living encyclopedia to where daddy's like a genius. He knows everything. We can go to him about anything. He can provide us guidance, and he's done it, number one. Number two, on a personal thing, it could have been me. You know what I'm saying? Like as a child and as a teenager and as a young adult, even in college, I made some mistakes and somebody gave me a second chance or I didn't get caught. There's a lot of things that, in my past that people probably don't know about or whatever. It could have easily been me, right? And so I think that's something you have to be mindful of. And then number three, I think the thing I try to recognize is everybody's a genius when they're in the right environment. A shark is a genius when it's in the ocean. It doesn't have to think about being a shark, but when it's on the beach, it looks dumb. A bird is a genius naturally in the air. It knows what to do, but it looks dumb in the water. Everybody's a genius, but you have to be attuned to an individual to understand where their genius lies and what kind of environment they need to be to excel and have that genius exuded out. Number three. And then number four, I would say, lastly, the main thing that I try to do is I'm trying to, like you was going directly to the students, right? And trying to get them one-on-one. I'm trying to go to these teachers and these leaders to help them to stop looking at minority kids in a deficit mindset and start being an achievement mindset and recognizing that just because you see a black kid in the hood, it doesn't mean they're in the gang. It doesn't mean that they don't have potential to be successful. It doesn't mean that they don't have genius inside of them. And you have to reprogram some of our leaders and individuals to look at our minority kids in a different light because they provide snap judgments based on what they see on TV. So those four things is what inspires me every day to be like, I'm trying to speak to the leaders to make sure that the leaders can duplicate that mindset in the classroom so students don't feel like the teachers don't gave up on them, right? So those are my four.
For me, it's changed over the years. So starting off, mine really, for me, takes off at an extremely young age, starting in elementary when I was diagnosed with a disability. And then trying to, what happened first is I actually accepted what somebody else said I could or could not do. So I spent about 3 years hiding and ducking and dodging instead of taking that thing head on. So then it became, okay, nobody else can tell me what I can and cannot do with my life. I'm going to do what I want to do. And there's generational curses in my family that I need to break because I've never met my father. I don't know who he is. There's a certain age when people had kids in my family. There's so many different things for me that I was like, okay, I need to break these generational curses and start becoming the trailblazer. And then completely flip that around. And now that I have kids, it's more about the legacy, right? How do I prepare them for the world? And how do I make sure when I leave, they have an inheritance, right? Something I didn't have. They have a starting place that was a lot higher than where I started from. So for me, those are how my stuff is flipped right now. Is really about legacy and building legacy and trying to build some type of wealth for when I am gone, my kids can step into that and keep moving. And then from a professional standpoint, is really trying to figure out how do I get these colleges to understand, hey, there's nothing wrong with this student. We may have to do a couple different things to help them get to where they need to be because they've come from a place that hasn't prepared them for college. Okay, that's fine. But that doesn't mean that they're dumb or they don't know or they're not smart or they don't have the tools. We just have to tweak it a little bit to get them jump started. And then once they're in there, they're more successful than some of the other students. But part of it is really believing in themselves. I feel like a lot of, especially kids from where I came from, felt like it was hopeless. It's not that many options. I mean, my kids, and we talked about this before, but my kids had the opportunities to see a Black president. When I grew up, we saw the local drug dealer riding on whatever, some dubs through the neighborhood. We may have saw somebody playing basketball on TV acting, and that was it. We didn't have no other contact with any other Black male that was successful outside of that. I mean, maybe the garbage man or something like that, but ain't nobody's like, oh yeah, I want to be a garbage man. You know what I'm saying? So that really trying to find a way to let people know, hey, you are worth it and you have something. But you got to believe in yourself at the end of the day, because it's going to be really hard to find other people to back you all the time. That's something that I even tell my kids right now. Like, you got to be able to believe in yourself when nobody else will, because you don't get told no a lot. But you got to be able to find your yes. So
I like that. Q, go ahead and answer that question too, sir.
Yeah, man. So for me, much like David, man, mine has changed over the years. At first, you know, my dad dropped out in the 12th grade. My oldest brother dropped out in the 12th grade. So at first, my motivation, drive, and grit really was just not to be like them. And I think I really held that, man, probably up to like most recently as like 2 years ago. My biggest drive and motivation was I did not want to be like my biological father or like my brother. I wanted more, you know, I didn't want that lifestyle. And no one in my family, like I said, had, you know, they hadn't went to college. I'm a first generation college student. And so, man, that was it. That was every day. Something that get me out the bed is like, dang, I don't want to be like him. Dang, I don't want to be like that. You know what I mean? Until recently, man, where I really got to the point where it was like, you know, listen, I have nothing to prove. You know what I mean? Like, I'm solidified in who I am. And I felt like more so at that moment when I realized that, you know, I have did this all up to this point, trying to not be like them and necessarily doing it for me and for my legacy and for my generation of people and young people and my little brother that's going to come after me and my kids, right? And so recently, man, it has shifted to more so the thing that gets me up in the morning, that makes me happy, that makes me excited is, number one, being a role model to my little cousins and my little brother. To me, that is like super important, right? It means nothing for me to be able to go and mentor guys all across the nation, but yet people within my own family, my own household lack. You follow what I'm saying? That was the first realization I came into. The second one was, I am most happy, I am in my zone when I am making impact. When I'm making impact, when I'm seeing the impact that my team and I are making, that is that drive and that motivation for me, man. And so like I said, over the last 2 years, man, it shifted from don't want to be like dad, big brother, to listen, this is what really matters. This is what's happening right now. How do you use yourself, your platform, and all of this? And man, that's the excitement to get up out the bed every morning for me, Doc.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So if you're tuning in for the first time, we are My College Draft, presenting to you Educate You podcast, outstanding panel, outstanding guest. I want to say this, man. Yesterday, I was running not too long ago with my nephew, man. So my thing is I like to run a full route. And so I'm running, and he got tired. And then I looked up, he disappeared. and my goal was to get to a certain point. And when I found him, he said, "Man, I already went to the point." But I'm like, "But you took this shortcut, and we were supposed to do this route." And my thing was to try to have a teachable moment, not to take shortcuts. But then I realized that young people have goals. They just approach them different than we do. We typically, some of us, the older generation, try to go and try to not cut corners. And they're like, but this is a easier way. And so I realized I need to start listening more, right? And so my thing is, and I love pouring into people, man. Like that's just my thing. And so when I saw that, I think so often what we do, especially when you get a certain age and certain generation, you start thinking you know everything and you stop listening. And so what I do right now, I just value what the things that you guys are doing, what you guys are saying, and it's helping me to listen more. And that's my encouragement to anyone who feels like you said, difference between life coach and mentor, regardless of which role they take, just listen a little bit more, and we can make a little bit more of a difference.
Can I add something?
Yes, sir.
So, I think that's great because there's two things in what you said and what Dave said. When I think about the shortcuts, and we've ran together. I'm all about being efficient, and so I think that's the new pathway because you have to think about the generational examples they've had, and it really starts with Enron. When they saw, the narrative in America used to be you go get a degree, you work for a job, you stay in that job for 30 years, you get your pension, you retire, da da da. Enron was the very first major, or not the very first, but a very prominent case in which the company screwed people and was like, you don't got nothing. You worked here for 30 years, you got a retirement of zero, right? And then that ingrained our minds of like, crap, you got to start trying to figure out how you're going to do your own savings. And so our kids and the kids that, this generation right after us are thinking to themselves, if this is the end destination, this route has been the old narrative, the old system, and I need to be as efficient as possible to get to this end destination. So if that's to create something, if that's to have a shortcut, and then for them, they're not cheating the system because to them, the objective was get to the end destination, right? And we feel like you cheating because you're not going through. They're like, no, you said get to the end destination. You decided to go around the Monopoly board. I gotta go straight to go and collect $200 card. I'm about to use the straight to go. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that's one thing. But then the other thing that I think about going to what David said is this thing of legacy. And one thing I think that does not happen in the Black community enough is what are we actually leaving for our kids, right? And so we're busy trying to break generational curses, and I understand that, but what are you leaving? So like if you're leaving like a depleted car, you can say I left my kid a car, but the car don't got no value now. Like there's nothing they can do with it. It's just a junk, and they either gotta turn it in, and you see what I'm saying? Yeah. And so what are we leaving that is tangible? Because one thing I think about when it comes to Black Wall Street, and what I encourage people who are listening to this today is research not just the success that Black Wall Street and those families had. What did they leave for their children? And how long did that mindset last in the families? That's the thing, is that you don't necessarily need to leave a lot of material things, but the main thing that you want to leave is the blueprint in the mind on how to achieve success. Because statistically, fortunes dissipate after 3 generations because the story on how to keep it and what you need to do, the process and mentally to do it is eroded, and no one's listening and no one's telling. And so, as we're building up entrepreneurs and as we're building up communities, really the thing is, every time I look at stuff that I'm trying to do, how can I lead this to my kids to where it gives them a better platform to be successful in the game? That's one of the reasons why a lot of white families were able to send their kids to college, because they got a house passed down by their grandparents or their parents, and they live in a house. So now they got this other house that their parents lived in. That house is paid off. They can use that equity on that house to pay for the college loan. So their student's not in any debt. And then that student can start using the money that they were going to use for student loan and start investing in business ideas. And what are we doing though? Because we're so reliant on student loans, right? Like my student loan balance is stupid ridiculous. Like I always joke that I'm in a relationship with Sally Mae and she got a house and 2 cars and I never see her because the amount of money I owe her is like ridiculous. But it's like, but what are we doing to pass on the mindset of the legacy? Not just here's a house or hey, we lived in apartments all our lives and now I got a house and here you go. If I can't do anything with it, then what does that do for me? You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So we have to be mindful about that as well.
Yes. So we're coming to the close of this Educate You podcast. Topic was Black Wall Street, man. It's been phenomenal. I want to do something a little different. Ricky and Q, what I want you guys to do is the scripture says that the people perish for lack of vision. And so I need for 30 seconds, I'm going to need both of you to speak vision and those who are listening. But David, I want you to close us out with that mantra, if you don't mind, that you do with your sons. Man, I think it's phenomenal. Can we do that? So, Dr. Frierson, Q.
I'm gonna let Q go first. I need
Go
time.
ahead, Q.
Look, I was like, all right, he gonna go for it. Okay, cool. Man, so I just take this moment, man, just to encourage every person that's listening to this podcast, that's going to view this on YouTube, and just number one, to say that, hey, you are somebody, and anything that you put your mind to, you actually can do. There is absolutely nothing that can stop you from doing what it is that you feel in your heart that you're called and purpose to do. Second thing that I would say to you is, hey, listen, it's going to be hard, but write the vision and make it plain. We understand, where there's no vision, people perish. So write down your goals, write down your aspirations, and put a timeline beside those goals and aspirations. And as you continue this journey, frequently revisit that, look at that, right? And then you measure your success, you measure your outcomes off of your goals and aspirations that you have already set forth. So listen, all things are possible. If I was in church, I'd say through Christ Jesus. But all things are possible. You know what I'm saying? When you put your mind to something, you can do it and you will do it.
I love it.
That was good. Okay.
No,
so I think I for those who are listening, I think about vision as almost like a deck of cards and you're playing spades. You might not get the best hand. And sometimes you hear this phrase, I have 3 in a possible, or 2 in a possible, or 5 in a possible. And what I want you to hear is what Q Derek said, and what I'm saying is the possible is when you see how things are played out and you still pursue the hand that you've got. No matter what it looks like in your hand, if the game is played a certain way and you just stay persistent, the resources you currently have, and you play your cards right with the resources you currently have, that possible can always get you another one or maybe 2. And so regardless of what you think, your dad wasn't in the household, generational curses, you lived in the bad, wrong side of the town, you've been to jail, you got a record, whatever the case may be, there's always a possible if you have persistence. And to have persistence, you need to have purpose. And to have purpose, you need to have provision. So as long as you have a vision, then you can have purpose. And as you have purpose, you can be persistent. And when you are persistent, anything's possible. So just like a hand, anytime I'm playing spades, I always think about the vision of, if I know I got these things, there's always a possible. So just remember that no matter what your situation is currently, there's always a possible.
Okay, church. I didn't know we had a bishop on here today.
I'm just saying, it is a Sunday, and we can pass around a virtual plate and get this offering going.
All right. So upon Lamont's request, this is what I have. I wrote for my boys, and they recited in the mirror to themselves every day. So it's one of my lessons for them to start trying to speak life into themselves. So it goes, I have a heart of a lion, so I'll wear my crown of pride. I have a soul of an eagle. If I don't try to fly, I will never soar. I have the wisdom of an owl, so I will pursue excellence relentlessly every day. I am great, I am great, I am great. So
and there you have it. Another one in the book, fellas. Thank you so much. Panel as always, man. What's that? Go ahead, David.
Real quick, Q, could you let the people know where they can get in?
Yes, I was definitely going to do that.
Your,
Thank you, David. Thank you.
Your information is at.
Most definitely. Thanks so much, fellas. So they can go to www.tulsanonprofit.org. Once again, that is tulsanonprofit.org, or they can follow us on social media at Tulsa Nonprofit.
That's awesome. Yes, Dr. Frierson.
I just want to give a big shout out to everybody who's a father today. Not a dad, but a father, actually taking care of their kids, instilling lessons. It's Father's Day. It's time for us. Hopefully everybody got their big piece of steak or big piece of chicken and was able to watch. There ain't no games on. So hopefully you got to watch a movie that you wanted to watch. Just a big shout out to all the fathers out there today.
Yeah, I need to do that too. To you brothers on the panel of fathers, man, I'm forever inspired by you brothers, man. So, but again, thank you for tuning in to another Educate You podcast by My College Draft. And remember always, education is new money. Get some.
There ain't no farther to try. In the strong survive. These hurdles I'm facing are just life, but